So last week, my contemporary Africa class was watching the 1966 film The Battle of Algiers, and as a collector of foreign currency, I have 4 banknotes from the French colonial period of Algerian history, so of course I had to bring them in to show the class. 100 francs, dated June 7, 1940. 5 francs, dated November 16, 1942. 1 franc issued by the Economic Region of Algeria on January 31, 1944. 5 francs, dated February 8, 1944. Although Algeria today uses the dinar, during the French colonial period they used francs, the official currency of France. Most other French colonies use these francs as well, with different local variants, with exceptions in regions like Indochina, which use the piastre. The banknotes feature colorful, detailed designs featuring local landscapes and people. However, the writing is mostly in French, not Arabic, the majority language of the Algerians. Francs are mentioned in the film as it depicts scenes in the 1950s. During the last end of the French colonial period in Algeria, as the push for Algerian independence grew much stronger. The film specifically depicts scenes from 1954 to 1957, including a UN vote on French rule in Algeria, as well as scenes of local Algerian independence movements conducting bombings, with bombings committed by the French colonial police as well. The film ends with a scene set in 1960 and reveals that in 1962, the Algerians were allowed to vote to become independent and join the UN shortly after. The film, which focuses on the lives of independence supporters living in the traditional Kasbah of Algiers, shows the harsh reality of living under French colonial rule as a native Algerian and the many struggles, both socially and legally, they had to face. In the film, we can see staunch differences between the traditional Kasbah of Algiers and Algiers' European-dominated waterfront. The film also depicts many events that took place during the uprising of 1957, including the arrival of French paratroopers and the harsh campaign they led to try and shut down Algerian independence supporters, portraying them as a minority of a largely loyal population. This claim by the French colonial government, however, is very far from the truth. In one scene, journalists question the head of the French paratroopers. He claims that the FLN, the leading group in the Algerian independence movement, represent a very small fraction of the Algerian population, which he claims is mostly loyal, and he also claims that the French troops are not hurting anyone and that torture is not in their orders. However, in the next scene, we see French troops in an Algerian house in the Kasbah openly torturing prisoners right in front of their own families. One noticeable sign of this conflict is frequent bombings. In one scene, we see how multiple women working for the FLN dress in ways that get them favored by French troops controlling the Kasbah, allowing them to go into the European areas. There they plant bombs at businesses that go off with extreme destruction, with many ambulances surrounding the areas to treat the dead and wounded. In another scene, we see members of the French colonial police sneaking into the Kasbah at night and leaving a package bomb outside of the home of an Algerian independence activist, which goes off in the narrow alleyway and kills multiple people in the home, including children. However, no ambulances are seen, and local Kasbah residents have to dig the survivors out of the rubble themselves. In another climactic scene of the film, the French leader of the paratroopers speaks through a megaphone to an Algerian independence activist and his family who are hiding in their home in a wall. The French paratroopers leader has had an explosive device attached to the wall just outside of where they're hiding. He will detonate it and destroy the home and kill all of them with it if they do not surrender. And the Algerian independence activist tells him to do it anyways because he won't surrender. So he does it. All 4, including a young boy, are killed instantly, and the Kasbah is devastated, watching the destruction. The French leader, however, simply walks away, and another member of the French paratroopers refers to the independence activists as tapeworms, a very derogatory term to use towards their colonial subjects, and shows the carelessness they held towards the native Algerian population. After the uprising of 1957 in Algiers is put to an end, the French paratroopers return to France, and the status quo of colonial Algiers returns. However, in 1960, we see massive protests in Algiers, and not just in the Kasbah. The protesters flood the streets everywhere, including the European areas such as the waterfront. They are much more unified than they were in 1960, and now many French politicians in Paris have decided that they should probably try to pursue a new relationship with Algeria. The film ends with an explanation of how, in 1962, France eventually decided to allow all of Algeria's population, both native and European, to vote on whether or not they wanted to remain in France. The natives, who make up a majority of the population, unlike the French settlers, some of who have been living there for several generations, overwhelmingly decide that yes, Algeria should be an independent country. France grants their wish, and Algeria gains independence in 1962. The film, which was made in 1966 in the rising years of the Cold War, would cause some controversy. The joint Algerian-Italian production was actually banned in France initially out of claims that it was FLN propaganda. Today, the film is widely well regarded for its quality presentation of what were then recent historical events in an unbiased and accurate manner. These Algerian franc banknotes are interesting physical traces of Algeria's time under French colonial rule and physically demonstrate what French rule in Algeria looked like. Although the pretty visual scenes on the banknotes depict native Algerian life under French colonial rule as idyllic and just normal as it would have been otherwise, the film shows that in reality this was rarely the case, especially for those that were politically active. It is worth noting that two of the banknotes are much visually simpler than the other two, as they come from the World War II period, during which time France and its colonial governments were more focused on fighting World War II than printing fancy banknotes, so they came out much more simpler with simpler colors and basic designs. So, those are my Algerian franc banknotes and how they relate to the 1966 film Battle of Algiers, which I watched in my class, so of course I brought them in to show. Thanks for watching, and that'll be all for today.